Welcome to Chapter 23, Love and Sex. Love and Sex in Art, an Introduction. So we're going to be talking about the cultural, personal, and political aspects of sex and how that has taken on a variety of art forms, historically and in contemporary art. The history of sex and art has been, there's been ritual significance and some of the smaller figurines of female sculptures that were supposed to signify fertility in ancient times. And, that's constantly being rethought and examined about how and why we assume that it symbolized fertility. You can see some of the use of sex in Japanese erotic prints. You can see it in some of the paintings that we'll be talking about from Western art history as well. So it's interesting to think about how historically and even today with modern and contemporary audiences, the idea of love and sex can still shock audiences, but it also can expose them to thinking about gender inequalities, violence, trauma, and just all the different things that this, incredibly human concept is exploring through the arts. And so we're going to be looking at, the aspect of sex in society, fertility, morality, beauty standards, gender ideals, and just looking at all the different ways that sex has been sort of considered over time. The main topics that I'll quickly go through with this video and PowerPoint presentation is just looking at some of the physical and spiritual ways that love has been manifested through art in different cultures. I'll also be talking about, this idea of desire and how that's been kind of navigated through artwork throughout history. And then we'll be ending with talking about the kiss, which is what you're going to be working on for this week for the main essay topic. So we'll start off looking at one of the artists that you're going to include in your essay discussion post for this week, which is Auguste's Rodin, the artist, the French sculptor, and his sculpture called The Kiss, which has, if you learn about it and take a minute to watch this video, you'll learn that it's the image, the sculpture is kind of from a story about these two lovers that were caught in the act and slain by this woman's husband. They were killed by her and condemned to go to hell. So that's the story that comes out of Dante's Divine Comedy. And then Rodin made the visual representation of this story that we are going to examine this week. And it's kind of looking at this idea of love and this idea of, how the coupling and a lover's enduring embrace lasts over time. I think everyone's going to have their own interpretation of what they learn from this particular sculpture, and that will come out in your essay this week. So one of the first things we're going to just kind of look at is the difference, the way that the physical and the spiritual love manifests itself in different cultures. And here we're looking at, two different artworks from the Hindu world. And so, one of them's from India, and how playful these artifacts are, looking at how sex is displayed as an act of enjoyment. And that could symbolize potentially the harmony of male and female, which could translate into the coming together, the harmony of the cosmos. So in different parts of the world, and when you look at different art objects from a historical vantage point, you can see how sex is explored much more playfully sometimes in non-European cultures. And then if we do jump over to a European culture, so ancient Greece, we're going to be looking at a statue again where we're seeing nudity, of course, and it's explored in a very different way, in the sense that we're not sure exactly how these two gods are connected. We know that Dionysus is the god of fertility, vegetation, pleasure, festivity, and is supposedly referenced as the god of wine. And then Eros is the god of love. And so, these two gods coming together in this particular sculpture some people have a really unique idea of what it symbolizes. The different size of the gods and the arrows looking up. And it's just interesting to think about what is the symbolism. And so one of the things I want you to think about is what is the size perspective visually symbolized to you? And then, we looked at the Persian tale of this painting, The Seduction of Usaf, which again tells another story. So, a lot of these artworks from history tell a very specific story, whereas modern art might have more of a specific intention to still sell a story, but in a different way than historically the artworks would visually represent. Here, Usaf's, the wife of the Sultan, was chasing the servant through the palace and, trying to have an affair. And the servant, of course, says no. And then, being that she has more power, can falsely accuse the servant. But what I think is really beautiful about this painting is the way that it's depicted. It looks like a labyrinth, the use of color, the tonality, the structure of the patterns. It's just a beautiful artwork that symbolizes then this story, which reflects these ideas of love and feelings and emotions throughout time. One of the artworks that was discussed in the book, and thinking about how courtly love was sort of navigated in medieval times. And so this is coming from 1180, and it shows, if you look at the edges around this jeweled box, which would have been called a small casket, you can see how the musicians kind of would carry these traditions of the knights or the noblemen trying to seduce or conquer a woman, and what they would have to go through to get a woman to become favorable of this particular knight and maybe have an affair or fall in love and get married. It's obviously each story is very different in each culture. The visual representations of how love was explored and how people kind of got to that place of a intimate connection is very different. And we're looking at the different ways in which the artwork represents how these cultures might have conquered this idea of love. And then if we kind of navigate over to, I guess now we're in 1540, around there, and we're looking at, again, the privatization of sex in the West. And so again, now we're really starting to see the church coming in and controlling the ideas of the masses. However, with that being said, different kings might have a very different idea of what their taste was and what they wanted to demonstrate of the cleverness of their particular court or reign. And so here we have this really complicated painting, an allegory of Venus and Cupid, that has a lot of erotic notions, but then when you learn about the characters, you kind of learn that these folks probably shouldn't be having these erotic connections. So I'd like for you to take a minute to watch this video and learn more about how it's visually analyzed and the implications of the characters in this particular painting, and how that relates to the different ways that, again, sex has been explored in such a different way in the European cultures as opposed to the non-European cultures, where sex is explored with a sense of freedom and playfulness. So this week we're going to be focusing on this idea of the kiss, and we're going to be looking at 3 different artists, and this is one of them, Breschini, and he's known for this really famous sculpture, which I just love. And I like how it's almost the male and the female just almost become like completely united, and it almost looks like their eye is one eye. And it's, cut from one massive block of limestone, which is also, I think, just a beautiful color and tone and texture of the way that this has been sculpted. And so again, I'd like for you to go ahead and watch this in preparation for how you're going to be responding to the essay. Another artist who examines this idea of the kiss is Andy Warhol. And, we've talked a little bit about him before, and he made this movie called Kiss, which is I think it's about 55 minutes. And you can watch just a segment of it if you'd like, so you can get a sense of it. But he was really, such a visionary, and kind of looking at the idea around being a voyeur, so looking in onto someone's personal life and watching strangers, just having a makeout session, I suppose. But how that has led into some of the reality TV webcams and YouTube videos that we're bombarded with, that just seem the norm. When he made this in the early 1960s, those kinds of ideas were completely not even considered. Everything that was put on television or in movies was very constructed. So here you have the opportunity to learn a little bit more and think about the relationship that Andy Warhol had to this idea of reality TV. And then one of the artists that you're going to be talking about is Banksy, who again is, I think one of my favorite mural graffiti artist, who keeps his identity unknown, which is kind of interesting in itself. And you're going to be examining this art piece called Kissing Coppers, and the different ways it's been interpreted over time. It's got a lot of controversy. However, it's still sold for $575,000 in 2014. So I think you'll enjoy learning about him if you don't really know about him already, and I look forward to seeing how you talk about him in your essay. And here's just some more artwork by him, because he does a lot of different types of work, graffiti, but also kind of the image of the truck with these stuffed animals coming out of it. And he kind of does public sculpture and public graffiti. A lot of his work is then somehow migrated into the art world, but his intention is just to have things available for anyone out on the street. So here's a couple of more videos so you can learn about him and his process. And then finally, the critical process this week was thinking about love and sex. And so Barbara Kruger is a really wonderful American conceptual artist who has done billboards and different large art installations throughout the country and throughout the world. And a lot of her work is really kind of focusing on how we're bombarded with the different advertising in our culture and our society, and how that affects us and our ability to, keep our own sense of self. And so her work is really a commentary on consumer culture, and how a lot of that oftentimes has very sexual strategies to provoke the viewer to participate. So I want you to watch this video and learn a little bit more about her. So just to review, we kind of quickly looked at some physical and spiritual ideas around love and how it manifests in different cultures. We started to look a little bit at the different ways that love and desire has been considered throughout history via the different artworks that you've read about and that we quickly touched on, and hopefully you'll be able to watch the videos. And then finally, we've got these 3 artworks that you're going to be considering for your main discussion for this week. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and the images that I put together, and I really want you to watch the videos. Thank you.